Thank you very much, Jostein. I'm here to tell you to launch and lose. In my regular work, I'm hard at work trying to build Europe's #1 solar company. And we're doing that by creating a marketplace for solar installers and solar installations. That's pretty much what we set out to do when we founded the company 3.5 years ago. What we didn't set out to do was to create the software that we're using to do it. We didn't set out to build a French e-commerce site that helps people find out how much energy they use. We didn't set out to communicate how Swedish people can get solar panels in an easy, safe, and cheap way. We didn't make a bidding system for installers to tell us exactly what the cost of their screws, their scaffolding, and their driving would be. We didn't set out to create a map system that discovers where historical buildings in France are so that we can do building permits for people who want to put solar panels on their roofs. We didn't set out to build a system to analyze building shapes so that we find out how many solar panels you can put on their roofs. And we certainly didn't set out to build a system that does project planning for handymen. We didn't set out to do any of those things. Our innovation journey didn't start with having a faintest clue of what we needed to build to get to being Europe's #1 solar company. So how do we come about building this kind of stuff, right? Well, we didn't sit around and figure out how to build stuff. We went out and built it. Our journey started, at least my part of this journey started when I was on a sea-level trip as employee at Schibsted. And we were in California and visited cool companies, and turned out that started asking myself a couple of questions. The answers didn't maybe come out in Schibsted's favor, but at least disproving the fact that you can't get inspiration from going to California. So I was in this factory, and I thought, okay, what's going on here? To me, this is like a cathedral to renewable energy. It's a cool place. I guess regular car factories probably are too, but I've never been in one of those. So I was in this factory where I saw robots creating electrical cars. And being a little bit of a nerd, I started thinking, wow, I need to learn more about this stuff. So I started reading about batteries, and then I started reading about solar panels, and one thing led to the other. And then I came to the point where I came to a realization that I knew something to be true that not many people knew to be true. And that's kind of the test if you've read a book about innovation called 0 to 1. One of the tests of whether you should be a founder is if you know something to be true that few people know are true. And my truth was based on 2 observations. One was that as solar panels get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, they will be competitive everywhere. Even at Svalbard, the Spitsbergen airport, they have solar panels on their facade. That's a banal truth. But when it gets coupled with the fact that if the panels get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, the price of the panels matters less and less and less and less, and something else starts mattering more and more and more. What starts mattering more? It's the cost of the guy with the screwdriver. It's the cost of the guy who drives the truck to your home with these cheap panels. It's the cost of marketing these cheap panels. It's the cost of selling these cheap panels. And all of a sudden, I came to the realization that if you want to be good in solar power, you need to be good at this last part. The best solar companies will be the ones good at the last mile, good at marketing and selling solar panels, good at organizing the handymen who are going to put solar panels on their roof. And then I recognized that this sounds like a job for me, a media and marketing and tech guy, rather than a solar installer guy, not an engineer. And to me, that was irresistible, and we started building this company. But how do you get from that realization to product? Well, I guess you shouldn't think too much about where you want to be later. I don't think if you want to build a social movement that mobilizes 4 million people all across the world, I think you shouldn't start about thinking on how you can get 4 million people mobilized all across the world at once. You need to start with something a lot simpler. Sitting alone in front of the Parliament of Sweden. And I'm not saying that will maybe work again, but you cannot focus on the end result. You need to focus on the start. And to us, it was about going out and doing things and then building products that solve the problems that we encountered. In the beginning, we were this small team. Within our first week, we had people who wanted solar panels. Within our second week, we had sold the first solar panels to people at a terrible loss. But that was customers that we got in the door, and we started learning. What our customers told us was that they do not want to pay for solar panels. We thought, okay, we can lease you the solar panels. So we created a leasing company, Otovo Leasing. People told us they thought it was a hassle to own solar panels, so we thought, we'll remove the hassle. We created a service contract called the Otovo Community. We would take care of insurance and maintenance on their panels forever. We figured out that a big part of this market is going to be not only to consumers, it's going to be to commercial and industrial buildings. So we created Otovo B2B services. We realized that people were in doubt on whether they would be able to sell the surplus power that the solar panels produced back to the grid. So we thought we can remove that problem by creating an electricity company. We created an electricity company called Otovo Nabostrøm for Norway. We figured out that marketing is expensive, so we should make some deals with building companies so we can sell through them to people who create new houses. So we created Otovo B2C with housing sales. And then we realized that people in Sweden have the same problem with electricity as in Norway, so we created an electricity company in Sweden. We realized that people had a hard time getting data out of their inverters, which is a piece of hardware. So we created this own manufactured hardware to get data out of the inverters up in the cloud so we could put information about their systems in an app. And then we created Otovo Solar, a platform to sell solar panels online. At this point, we had more product categories than I had employees. I can tell you that's not recommended. Leasing is incredibly expensive. It means every time you get a customer, it costs you 100,000 kroners. You run out of cash very fast. Taking responsibility for a piece of hardware for 20 years is very expensive, so you run out of cash. Working with commercial and industrial players or housing companies takes forever, so your learning is very slow. So we stopped doing that. It's easy to start a power company. It's very hard to run a power company, so we stopped with that. It's a nightmare to be in the house smart home business. We still have 1,000 Otovo hubs, so if someone wants to buy them for as little as 50,000 kroners, you can come to me afterwards and pick them up at the office. We're out of that business too. The only thing we're doing is selling solar panels online, which turns out is what we wanted to do in the beginning. We just went about doing very much stupid things to answer customers' need in the meantime. But now we have a lot more people. This is the Oslo office. And they all work on one single thing, creating Otovo Solar. But that has grown to be a lot more things, as I told you in the beginning. So what are the lessons from this journey? Right? We launched a lot of stuff. We lost a lot of money on it. We lost a lot of time on it. Do I regret it? Yes. Am I very happy for the learnings I got on it? Will that accelerate us going into the future? Yes, I think it will. And I think the situation that we're in, I think collectively now, is that launching stuff has never been cheaper. Learning stuff from launching has never been more valuable. And when those two things come together, it means the time available that's the sort of where competition is. It's about being fast. Okay? So why is it cheaper than ever to launch things? Well, there is a lot of innovation going into reducing the cost of creating software, of hosting software, or even just creating companies. Amazon Web Services has broken down the need for hosting. WeWork has broken down the need for long housing contracts. There's a lot of infrastructure that helps innovators and helps companies reduce the cost of trying out new things, right? So while a lot of the best ideas have already been invented, the cost of creating the new ones is lower than what came before you, right? So you're kind of like the youngest siblings in a group of kids. You have a little bit of an easier time than the first ones, although they maybe got more encouragement. With a more data-rich, a more computer-rich environment, it's easier to extract learnings from the experiences that you create than ever before. The analytical power that's at disposal for even 3 or 4 person companies is incredible. But that means you need to get things out in the real world so you can gather data about what's happening, how people buy, why they don't buy, how they renew their subscription, all these kind of things. It's easy to learn. It's the value of this gets better the more software gets put onto learning. So the value of learning has never been bigger, and that will just keep increasing. And it might be increasing so fast that it's guys who are already launched who are bound to win. I don't know enough about artificial intelligence and neural networks and these things, but you can look at a scenario where you get to a point where you learn so fast that you're impossible to catch up with in your industry. And all those two things combined means that you need to go fast. Or I think I've thought that for 10 or 15 years. Or I've always thought that the people I work with were a little bit too slow. That was kind of cute when you're the young guy in the company. It gets less and less cute when you're more and more the boss. But I still believe this. And I think sort of the broader world is kind of encouraging that way of thinking. What is the math to support it? Well, I think, in essence, whichever project you're on, you're running out of time. If it's inside a big company, you're running out of time for your boss's patience. You're running out of time because it's your project is supposed to be coordinated with something else, and if you don't make it, you might as well not do it. If you're creating your own company and you've received funding, you're running out of time because your runway of cash in the bank is depleting a little day by day. Everyone's running out of time in a way. When you're innovating, you're against the clock. Okay, so how should you think about using your time well? Well, if you start late, like the blue line, in essence, you'll often get shorter than if you start early. That's banal. But I think it's, even in a world where you launch too early, and your product is so full of errors that you progress slower from the start, the fact that you start early means that you have an advantage for a very, very long time. And that means you're more robust when your boss runs out of patience a little bit ahead of time, or if some unexpected event means that your runway runs out a little bit before, you'll be ahead of some launch plan where you're waiting till everything's perfect. Right? And these things, they accumulate over time. If you launch late, you get short, you raise money at low valuations, and you raise less money. And because you've launched late, you learn slower, so you continue growing slower. You will raise money at lower valuations, you'll raise less money, and you'll keep getting sort of on a slow track for your company. If you launch early, you get farther, you can raise at higher valuations. You see what I'm getting at, right? So you can just kick back, or launch stuff and kick back. No, that's not how it works, right? Because most of the time you say launch and lose, the idea isn't to launch and lose. It's to launch and lose and learn and not lose as much again, right? So a lot of what you need to do is to be really, really critical about what you're doing. Every one of those things that we launched, that I put a big strike through on the slide, those were things that were painful parting with. We had customers in all of those categories. We had broken promises in all those categories. That kind of sucked. A lot of those things weren't ruined products. Our power company was cash positive on a unit economics basis. It was an okay company. But in order to grow that, it would grow that at lower cash returns to our investors than growing the solar company. So it was kind of stealing resources from the more promising other business. So we had a performant business that we were killing because it was less performant than our best business. Those things, they are hard. But it learned us something about how to prioritize that we couldn't have done by doing it just on desktop, I don't think. So what I'd encourage you all to do is to launch and lose, and hopefully launch and lose a little bit less every time you do so. Thank you for listening to me. Now I'm off to create Europe's #1 solar company. Thank you very much.